Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org. Live from St. Paul, Minnesota, we welcome you to another season of Your Legislators, a roundtable discussion featuring state lawmakers who are prepared to answer your questions and discuss important issues affecting citizens of Minnesota. Now, here's your moderator for tonight's program, Barry Anderson.
Good evening and welcome to Your Legislators. We're delighted that you could join us for our program this week and in all the weeks ahead. I can say weeks ahead because there's at least a couple of programs that we're going to have, but we are coming down to the end, and we're going to talk a little bit tonight about that, what's left for the legislature to consider before the legislature goes home and summer comes to Minnesota. We had spring. It was Tuesday of this last week, and now we're ready to move on. I'm delighted that you could be with us here this evening, and we begin this program, as we do each week, by introducing our distinguished panel of guests who are going to help us unravel the mysteries of St. Paul. We have with us we have a veteran with us and a couple of folks who haven't been with us before, and we begin with one of those who's new to the program from District 7 in Duluth, Senator Roger Reinert. And Senator Reinert, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
As you mentioned, home is Duluth, Minnesota. When not in the legislature, I teach college. I do undergraduate at Lake Superior College and graduate courses at the University of Minnesota.
What do you teach?
Political science.
Oh,
yeah.
Right.
So it's a stretch, I know.
Does everybody in the legislature understand separation of powers? Never mind. Anyway, go ahead.
It comes in handy. The three branches of government, checks and balances. It does. And aside from that, I also actively serve in the Navy. I'm a Navy drilling reservist, an actively drilling reservist, so balance that commitment as well. And then for fun, I'm an avid runner and got my pilot's license a few years ago, so enjoy flying and also sailing Lake Superior.
And you've been in the legislature, you were in the House first, I think we discussed,
correct.
right?
Yep. I was on the Duluth City Council for 5 years. I did one term in the House, 2 years, and then this is my third year in the Minnesota Senate.
All right, very good. Well, we're delighted you could join us. Also joining us, a regular guest, been with us many times over the years from District 12, Elbow Lake, Senator Tori Westrom. Senator Westrom, tell our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, Barry, good to be here again. Senator Reinert, it seemed longer than that in the House. We served together. But, I was first elected, well, I'm from Elbow Lake. I grew up in that area, and that's where we still live. I'm an attorney as well in the non-legislative life. I serve on 4 committees in the Senate. This is my first term in the Senate, so I'm a freshman, although I did have 16 years in the House prior to that, first elected in 1996. So it's given me a little institutional knowledge around here. The 4 committees I'm on this year are the Transportation Finance and the Division, as well as the Transportation Policy, Environment, Ag and Jobs, Finance Division, and then the Finance Division in the Senate. And so good to be here.
You know, it's difficult for, I think, all legislators, particularly given the hours and the commitment that it requires to serve in the legislature, but the public may not fully understand the challenges that are present for lawyer legislators. I mean, the assumption is that the legislature is full of lawyers, and there perhaps was a time when that was true, but the numbers have dropped in recent years, and I think part of the reason is that it is a challenge, and I think you're in a solo practice there, if I recall correctly?
That's right, and it is. It's, you know, everybody's got another private job typically, and it's a challenge in the solo practice or any business that you're in. In fact, there's a lot of people that have left over the years because it just gets to be a challenge. And of course, I am married and I have 3 children as well. I forgot to mention that, but we.
Other people will remind you of that, so that's all right. You're, anyway, well, it's we're delighted you could be with us here again. So
good to be back.
All right, and finally, also joining us for the first time from District 13A, Rockville, Representative Jeff Howe.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here, and like you say, I'm from Rockville, which is south and west of St. Cloud, and has Cold Spring and Richmond and Paynesville Avon, Kimball, and
Just outside my district.
just outside your district, Tori. And I'm a retired firefighter. I also do some cold consulting in my real life, and I'm also a National Guard reservist. So spent a couple of tours in Iraq. I am married, have 4 kids. 3 of them are in the National Guard. So, and this is my first term, and I serve on the State Government Finance and Veterans Affairs. Of course, Veterans Affairs is near and dear to my heart. And being a transportation officer in the National Guard, I'm also on the Transportation Finance Committee, which I really enjoy. Also on Civil Law Committee and the Early Childhood and Youth Development. So all 4 are very interesting. Been a real learning experience, and really enjoyed it. So.
Well, let's jump off on the transportation issue a little bit. We talked a little bit about some highway issues. Let's start with you, Representative Howe. What transportation issues are we going to see over the next 10 days or so before the legislature goes home?
Well, I think there's going to be some interesting things come on in the transportation finance when they go to conference committee. We're going to see if what all plays out there with the wheelage tax and some of these other things that are going on. But I'm hopeful that it'll be kind of a bit balanced, basic bill that comes out of the conference committee, because I'm a little bit worried right now because the budget is coming up. We got to draw close here, and it's going to be interesting exactly how those bills come back out of conference committee and what all is in it.
Senator Westrom, let's just...
Well, it will be interesting. The Senate had a major change in their bill this week.
Just yesterday.
Just yesterday, we had quite a floor discussion about it, but the bill was in the tax committee, and it had a new sales tax or gross receipts tax on the gasoline at the wholesale level, 5.5%. It had a county option for wheelage taxes on every vehicle up to $10 and then up to $20 2 years later, and a few other taxes.
The half-cent.
Half-cent sales tax,
for transit.
Metro-wide for transit, and all of that got stripped out of the bill in the tax committee, as well as some weight limit reforms that I was interested in seeing happen for some updating of our weight limits and adding another axle to semis and going to 90,000. But all of that got changed. So it's really a basic bill right now in the Senate. It's just basically continuing to spend the gas tax revenues that we have, put it towards highway and road construction projects. And so all the new stuff that was in it coming out of the Transportation Division, which I wasn't supportive of all of it, but I was surprised that the whole thing got stripped out. And so I think it's either a done deal or maybe Senator Reinhardt knows it might be resurrected.
You've got the pleasure of having 3 transportation folks here. I didn't mention I'm Transportation, Taxes, and Commerce. So transportation is the committee I've served on all 5 years in the legislature. And as Tori mentioned, the bill we had out of committee a while ago sat for quite a while because there was clear disagreement with the House bill, and so for folks at home that thought that one party in the majority in the governor's office meant everything was just going to be slam dunk.
It's going to sail smoothly into the sunset.
The transportation bill is probably the best example of how that doesn't work. There was clear disagreement with the House, clear disagreement with the governor's office. The governor said no to an increase in either the excise or the gas tax, and Senator Dibble, who chairs in the Senate, sort of dug his heels in. And as Tori mentioned, just yesterday, the bill went to taxes. All of that got taken out, and I think we have it on the floor in the Senate tomorrow. So as of right now, the Senate doesn't have a transportation bill yet ready to head to conference, and here we are with 7 or 8 days left to go. So the representative's right. It's interesting here at the end.
And Barry, one other thing that was in the policy bill, which actually just got conferenced yesterday, I had offered an amendment in Transportation Committee before that policy bill went out for a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, raising our speed limit from 55 to 60. And several legislators, Democrat and Republican, rural and metro, supported that. We had that in the House or the Senate bill. It went to conference committee. The House had actually taken part of that language and amended it in their bill on the floor, and then the conferees, whose job is usually to uphold the Senate position or the House position.
Well, in this case, both.
In this case, both. They did not uphold either, and they took it out of the bill that's coming back. So maybe tomorrow there will be an amendment on the finance bill that's in the Senate. But
So stay tuned. Is that kind of
stay
how this
tuned. Those that have been asking for a little leniency or a little uptick in the speed limit, we were going to go to 60 miles an hour. That's what was palatable by most people. But right now that's not in the bill anymore.
Interesting. Let's frame the last several days. Senator Westrom, I knew I was going to do this, Senator Westrom. All these years in the program as a representative, somebody's just been insulted here. I'm not sure. Maybe it was me. Let's talk briefly about what...
I do it myself. So.
Let's talk briefly about what our framework looks like for the legislative session. The last day is what?
May 20th. Constitutional adjournment day is May 20th.
And we all know that it's May 20th.
Right. There's no doubt about that.
We do. And we've got a lot of finance bills in conference committee yet, and we've got to get them resolved.
Are there restrictions on things that can be considered in these last, 11 days maybe? Is that right?
As far as topics?
Topics or?
There really isn't. We're free to take anything up, although if they haven't made it through committee,
Right.
That's generally a restriction, but it's not a hard and fast rule. There's ways amendments are brought up on the floor. There's sometimes things, especially if they're more minor, are added into a conference committee bill that's related to a topic that's already in the bill. The general rule is an issue is supposed to have passed either the House or Senate floor before it is added into conference committee, but
even that is not hard and fast.
Even that is not hard and fast, especially if it's related to a topic that's in there. And sometimes that's the compromise that the House and Senate come up with in a conference committee. So there really isn't. We'll be dealing with a lot of things, but next week the finance issues will take more precedent because they have to, because we've got a little over a week to wrap everything up.
Right. Senator Reiner, what about your view on the last 11 days or so?
Well, and I think Senator Westrom really took us down the right road. It's the budget are the big pieces that are still hanging out there. Every single finance bill is waiting, and they're waiting. We had a chat about this before the show started. They're waiting because there's some strong disagreements between the Senate tax bill, the House tax bill, and the governor's position on it. So, we started with targets, and the public at home always, I think, can benefit from just this small primer of we start with these targets, and then committees do their work within their policy areas. And as Tori mentioned, there's a couple committee deadlines that sort of narrow several thousand bills down to maybe the 100 that might actually become law. And here we are at the end with some big disagreements around revenue and if there will be, how it comes about. And until that gets decided, none of these other K-12 or higher ed or transportation, none of them can sort of button up their bills and get them back to us. Where at this point, once they come out of conference, they cannot be amended anymore. They're just up or down votes. So I suspect that both the House and the Senate will have some long floor sessions, though the House much longer than the Senate. I don't think either Tori or I missed that.
We have noticed that. I have noticed that.
But, and I think it's going to be interesting with now today passing of the gay marriage bill, that actually adds about, depending on who you ask, about $600,000 to the state budget on stuff, and I'm kind of wondering where those dollars are going to come from in the budget bill, and what's going to have to shift or take place to make that.
You mean the cost to the state?
The cost to the state,
the benefits,
right.
And so that's actually going to add some more pressure to the governor and to the leadership to see how we're going to come up with that, because something's going to have to give there.
And just so our viewers are aware, the bill in question passed on the House side, and I think Senator Reinhardt, I think we were discussing that it'll then be on the floor of the Senate on Monday.
On Monday,
right?
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk, Senator Reinhardt, we're talking big picture stuff. We talked a little bit before the program began about caucuses, DFL, Republican. We got the red-blue thing going, but you were talking to me a little bit about purple caucuses.
Right.
Now, that's not a plant. Tell me what the purple caucus is.
Actually, it started, the concept started a couple years ago with, I'm assuming you're an Army reservist,
Yes.
correct? So, and I'm a Navy. And when I came into the Senate in 2010, Senator Ted Daly, who came in with me, was an Army guy. And I actually knew Ted because we served in the same unit. And in the military, we call these purple units. When you have Army green, Navy blue, Navy Marine, whatever, mixed in, they're purple units. And so the idea was, folks at home, they don't want us to always agree. They don't want us to, give on principles and compromise everything. But they just want to know that we can sit around and talk to each other and say, here is where we can agree. Nope, can't go where you're going there, and have sort of just an adult conversation about things. And I think all of us would probably agree that more often than people might think that that's exactly what happens, especially in committee. Wasn't able to sort of get the energy behind it then, but Senator Jeremy Miller from Winona and I actually, this is kind of how some of this works sometimes. We sit next to each other in transportation, and we started having this side conversation about the concept. And kicked it off about February of this session. We've had 4 gatherings now in the Senate. Some 26 senators have joined us at one time or another, and there's a core of 20 that have been participating every time. And, our goal isn't to come up with a position and make everybody vote it. Our goal isn't to, again, have anybody compromise their principles. Our goal is just to sit around and talk. And and I know folks at home might go, geez, that's all you guys do is sit around and talk. But there's real benefit, outside of these caucuses. And a great example is transportation. We, right after we had this difficult transportation hearing that Tori and I both referred to, we had our next Purple Caucus gathering. It happened that about 5 of us from the Transportation Committee were at that. And we just ended up talking about this basic concept that we have a problem. The problem is that the gas tax per gallon is a dwindling source of revenue as vehicles become more fuel efficient and we have more vehicles that don't use gas at all out on the roads. They're not paying to use the system. So what do we need to do? We can all recognize that that's the issue, and then we get our differences and, well, where do we go from there? And we had a great conversation about it. And that is something that doesn't happen as often as it could because they have their team and we have our team, and that's generally who we talk to, and we could stand to talk to each other more often.
At the risk of driving all our viewers to drink, I will just say that in your role as professor and talking about civic virtue and classical republicanism, and we're not talking about political parties, but we're talking about concepts that are 200 years old, if not older, and this is an echo of some of those conversations. So it's certainly something we'll be watching with interest, and we'll probably have some more discussion about.
Absolutely.
And just to that point, real briefly, Barry, today we had a campaign finance board bill up on the Senate floor, and many of the old timers, if you will, talk about the days before the John Marty gift ban law went into effect. And I think everybody recognizes that was a good change. Although many say the casualty of that is conversations don't occur.
Relationships. Yep.
Because before, a third party might be putting on a supper, and most legislators would go to that event, find themselves visiting with other members, some of their party, some of the other party. And that does not happen nearly like they say it used to happen. And so today we had an amendment that actually went on the bill that at least clarified that if the whole legislature is invited and staff is included, staff can receive a meal from the party or the third party that's hosting the event. Us legislators still pay. Nothing was changed on that. But the discussion came up, and that was my point, on the floor, both from Democrats and Republicans, especially the more senior ones that talked about that issue, that there sometimes isn't a venue for Republicans and Democrats to caucus, if you will, or get together and just visit with the other party members. And my district is different than Senator Reinhardt's, and if I can understand his issues, he can understand my issues better. Sometimes that leads to a better conclusion.
Representative Howell?
Well, yeah, and the 2 senators here didn't get a chance to go over to the Senate reunion over there at the Union Depot, but because my brother is a former senator, got to go over there, and he invited me over there, and I tell you what, if we had more functions like that where we all took part in it, because it was bipartisan over there, everyone's talking to one another, and I actually, being that I'm gluten free, I had Bob Lassard there cooking the fish. He made me some fish without breading on it, so I could eat it. So and so, real bipartisanship. Everyone's talking about topics, and I think we need more of that atmosphere.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to some controversies. We've got a question.
On that note.
On that note, yes. All right.
Like
enough of
Roger
that.
said, they don't want us to always agree either.
Right. Well,
So much for kumbaya.
Right. All right. Well, now we got a viewer who wants to talk about pensions. A viewer lives in northern Minnesota. He's concerned about the Duluth teacher pension bailout. This viewer notes that the benefits went up when the markets went up. It stayed up when the markets went down. Wonders about the wisdom of doing this. Can't they bail themselves out? What is the status of the pension bailout? Talk about pension issues generally. Who wants to take it? Maybe I'll pick on you, Senator, since
Well,
it's Duluth
and it's by no means unique to Duluth. You know, we have another bill traveling through both the House and the Senate that adds a surcharge on auto and fire policies to help with police and fire pensions that are underfunded. You know, I was going to say the caller, but I think they emailed in. The viewer is correct. At least in some of these cases, you know, benefits were adjusted sometimes generously as the market really soared. And then with the market really tanking during the recession, these plans became underfunded in a hurry. And so the challenge that's presented to the legislators on behalf of public employees is, you know, do you roll the dice and hope that these pension plans become healthy in enough time that they can take care of the people that are retiring as boomers really start moving into full retirement? Or do you keep a pledge that was made to public employees? So, you know, Duluth teachers are not unique. There just happens to be the Duluth Teachers Fund, which is separate from Minneapolis and St. Paul. But the very same issue is before the legislature with police and fire pensions as well.
Senator Westrom, I know that the legislature has a joint committee that has dealt with these issues through the years. Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Well, they have to try to maybe methodically discuss this. So the Senate and House each appoint minority and majority members to try to come up with a resolution on a pension bill that ultimately comes back to the legislature. You know, I've always been more on the side of, you know, it's your pension, it's your job to manage it, and we had to bail out the Minneapolis teachers' retirement pension about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and it was a bill I did not support. I thought they should have contributed more themselves, and that is the tension. And at some point, we will find probably a number that they have to contribute more, take less, stop taking increases in the future, even if the market does go up. Just keep it at lower annual inflationary increases to help make up some of the difference. The House and Senate will probably find some general fund money to put in to help make that deal come together. But I've generally been more of a critic and said, let the pension funds correct themselves, and if they have to go with 0% increases a few years until they can get it healthy again, that might be the decision. Because I have a lot of farmers, I have a lot of small business owners that don't have pensions, sure. And when their bank accounts or their retirement that they put away goes down, it goes down, and they don't have anybody correcting it. So that's kind of the tension that goes back and forth.
You know, and I think that, you know, we've heard from those pensions, and they made some corrections a couple years ago trying to, especially in the police fire,
Right,
trying to
right.
adjust that. Being a police fire retiree, I kind of keep my eyes on that a little bit. And, you know, and I was hoping that was going to be the answer, at least to the police fire fund. And the way it sounds is that isn't going to correct soon enough. But I think I think you're right, Senator Westrom, that's kind of where we need to actually focus, is changing those benefits to be able to have that fund get corrected, and then, of course, not raise the benefits, like you say, when the fund does get healthy, because the markets rule the day, and we've got to watch that. But
and I don't, Senator Reiner, you might remember, I don't serve on the pension commission, so you get involved when the bill comes back, but you don't in the details. But one of the things that I think has been talked about and we're working on, and I think it passed, if I recall right, but maybe Senator Reiner remembers, the calculation of anticipated growth used to be figured at like 8%
Right.
annually, and we lowered that to 7.5%, if I remember right.
Right.
Or there's discussion of doing that.
I believe it actually passed. We had a discussion last year, so it was lowered.
So it was lowered, and part of that helps correct it, because then everybody up front isn't expecting an 8% return, and that's on the high end of what pension funds expect nationally, and so we're trying to get more in the middle.
And I would note, and the representative probably knows on the police and fire better than I do, but at least on the teacher side with the Duluth folks, the actives now are up to almost a 7% contribution. The retirees received, I think, 4 years in a row, 0%, not even cost of living adjustments in the contribution. But that doesn't account for the double digits that had happened before, or the double digit losses year after year during the Great Recession. You know, at the end of the day, and this is something we had to do in the city of Duluth when I was on the city council, we made very hard decisions to go from a defined benefit to a defined contribution retirement, so that the governmental unit could quantify its investment in that. You know, and it is a product, I think, of a change in our economy. Pensions aren't that common anymore. As Tori mentioned, most people don't have them. I don't have, you know, the only retirement I have is my own money that I set aside. And I think that is probably where we're headed. But, you know, we do have these outstanding obligations, and at least I don't think we're able to walk away from them.
So, sometime in the future, that is going to be, I mean, that's the discussion right now, is that defined contribution. And I think that, like it or not, somewhere in the future, we're going to have to tell the future employees that that's what they're going to get.
You have to just make the decision, and then everyone hired after that knows that that's what the decision is. You know,
exactly.
Viewer from that famous Minnesota community, Unidentified Town, wants to talk about.
It's in the St. Cloud area.
Yeah, Garrison Keeler lives there, as a matter of fact. Anyway, this viewer wants to talk about the liquor tax. Wants to know what's going on with that, and this viewer is concerned. Isn't it true that Minnesota's liquor tax is already higher than bordering states? And of course, this is an issue. I suspect it's an issue in Duluth, Moorhead. Worthington, Breckenridge. Anyway, liquor tax. What's going on with the liquor tax? Senator Reinhardt, maybe we should start with you.
We don't have it in the Senate.
It is definitely in the House bill.
It is definitely in the House bill. Yeah.
Senator Westrom, any thoughts on the liquor tax?
Well, that is one of the differences that's holding up the targets that we talked about, is the House does have a very aggressive increase in the liquor tax as part of theirs. About a $2 billion, $1.8 billion increase in revenues for the state. Senator Howe, or Representative Howe, your brother.
He just got a promotion.
Or
Demotion, yeah.
But that's where it is, and so I don't, you know, if I had a crystal ball, my prediction is there will probably be something on the alcohol tax, but as they compromise it out, it really gets to be a leadership issue in the House and Senate when they set targets, and then the tax conference committee will have to ferret out what they're going to take. I don't see that all of those alcohol taxes are going to prevail, but I would guess the budgets are largely, there's going to be a tax increase in some of those areas. And in the end, it's just a question of how much and where. Not a tax bill that I'm supporting, but, you know, looking at the makeup of the legislature, I would guess there will be something.
Yeah, when you talk about, you know, I think the easiest one to look at is the tax on a barrel of beer. And, you know, we're double what South Dakota is, and in North Dakota and Iowa, and I should say, if it goes through, we'll be double all of those. And if it goes through, we'll be triple what Wisconsin is. So, you know, especially, that's just, I think, a real killer for those folks, those cities along the borders that, you know, can I save, you know, we're going from $4.60 or whatever on a barrel of beer to over $27. That's huge. And will I drive a few miles across the border to get that, save that tax dollar? You probably would. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know, not to bring in another issue, but we know from the lack of Sunday sales that people will clearly drive over the border to find those deals.
Talk a little bit about the Sunday sales issue. We were talking about that at the beginning before we began the program today. You've had some history with that.
Sure. I've been the Senate author all 3 years that I've been in the Senate. In 2011, we got it through the Senate Commerce Committee, which was the first time it had passed a legislative committee. You know, it's a perennial issue that polls really, really well, but it's one of these, you talk about civics and citizen lobbyists, you know, the primary opponent are liquor stores, especially small liquor stores, who don't want to be open on Sunday and currently have a structure where they get a mandated day off and know that no one else can be in that marketplace. But I think if we really want to support an open market, stores can make a decision if they want to be open. Consumers can make a decision if they want to make a purchase. The government doesn't need to be in regulating that, especially for those of us on borders. Every single state around us and both provinces to the north have Sunday sales. So, we can argue how much revenue is lost, but we're arguing the number, not whether it is or not.
The biggest opponents of that, I think, were the automobile sales industry, because they don't want to lose
They
their
don't want
day
to lose
off.
their Sunday.
So it's kind of interesting
I'm
how
not interested in cars.
it's just kind of interesting how all that goes together.
It is an interesting conundrum here that, as they say in political science, politics makes strange bedfellows. This is one of those issues that has lots of strange bedfellows.
But before we leave the liquor tax, I'm not as convinced that something will necessarily be in there. And it's one of these interesting ones for those of us who serve on taxes. We know where it is in relation to our border states, and some people make that argument. Others who I'm sure did in the House will talk about how it hasn't gone up for 22 years or something like that.
Right.
And, so it's a classic one where you can pick a statistic you like to argue your side of the story.
We have a viewer from Glenwood who wants to know, well, this viewer is opposed to the increase in the cigarette taxes. We're on sin taxes tonight, I guess. And then another viewer says, everyone's going to quit smoking, so where's that lost revenue going to come from? Two pretty good points. What does the panel think about that, Senator Westrom?
Very much related to the last discussion. I think it's 94 cents in the House bill.
$1.
No, it's $1.60 something.
And it's 94 in the Senate.
94 in the Senate.
94 in the Senate. $1.60 in the House. Back when the 75 cents was added 5-6 years ago to get us out of the state shutdown, that was a big change. And coming from a border area, people do head to North Dakota or South Dakota and buy their cigarettes. It still goes on in my area of the state. And so you add another $1 or $1.50, that will be a significant concern around the border. Of course, the proponents of it are saying we want people to stop smoking, so therefore we'll tax it more, and that'll cause more people to smoke. But it's a legitimate question, because in the fiscal notes that we do deal with actually do contemplate reduction of sales, but when you raise it that much, you still have an increase in revenue over the current status quo, because they at least don't anticipate that many people would stop, that it would actually regress the revenues we take in. But it's a very legitimate point, and I would guess there's a likelihood that, with the Senate at 94 cents and the House at $1.60,
Looks like about $1.20 maybe?
Looks like $1.20. If you had to predict, I would guess it's a pretty strong likelihood that would be one of the taxes that's increased in a tax bill.
Senator?
Unfortunately for the first viewer, I do think the cigarette tax is going to go up. There aren't many things in common in both the House and Senate bill, but an increase in the cigarette tax is one. The 94 cents puts us on par with Wisconsin, so that's important for those of us on that Wisconsin-Minnesota border. I do think your second person spoke right to a more critical underlying issue, and that is, should we be relying in the general fund for money on something we want people to stop doing, which is why we're taxing it to get them to stop doing it or get young folks to not start at all. And that then goes to an even deeper question, which we just never have much. And I think sometimes viewers forget it's a part-time legislature. All three of us have homes somewhere else and lives somewhere else you're trying to maintain. And so, time doesn't always permit to have these great, long philosophical conversations. But, at the end of the day, budgets are about what do you want and what are you willing to pay for it. And a lot of times it seems like at the legislature we get stuck on what we're going to pay for, and maybe not as much on what do we really want.
And to that effect, I'm opposed to that, to raising that tax, because I think there's most folks that smoke are addicted to it. And, I wouldn't be as opposed to raising that tax if we took that tax money and plowed it into and spent it on prevention and quitting and those type of cessation
or
costs.
direct to health care costs that the state pays for.
Exactly.
Right.
Go plow it back into that. Yep. But just to put it into the general fund, I can't support that. Right. And so I think that's a philosophical difference that I think if we had more discussion, we might be able to gain some ground there.
Yep.
Viewer from Duluth wants to talk about caregiver wages. They've been very much in the news. Discussion about health and human service budgets. This viewer also suggests that homeless shelter workers should be included as well. I'm not certain about where that piece comes in, but let's start with the caregiver wages. Since it's from Duluth, we'll pick on you, Senator Reinhardt. What's going on with that issue?
I get to be first out of the gate. The Senate bill.
All your relatives are calling you. That's all I can say.
The governor proposed a 5% increase. I think we hadn't seen an increase in those wages for, somebody help me out,
four or 5 years.
Yeah.
Something like that.
The governor proposed a 5%. I know the Senate has a 2.5%. I think the House is in 2%. So, like many things, it's not as much maybe as people would like, but it's a step in the right direction. And, there's a lot of managing of expectations right now, I think, and maybe less for you two than for us. They think Democrats are in control. All of a sudden we're going to, whatever their unfavorite thing, least favorite thing was from either a Republican majority or a Republican governor, it's all going to get done this year, and that's unrealistic. These are folks that do really tough jobs. I don't want to speak for either of the other members here. It's not work I would want to do. And I thank them for doing it, and 2.5% at least is a positive step. And as far as the homeless shelters, the state doesn't directly pay for those like we do in assisted care facilities and facilities for people with disabilities.
Senator Westrom?
Well, the viewer's right, and we've been pushing for an increase. And there again is another time where several of us rural senators and representatives actually got together a few times this early in session to talk about this exact issue with our nursing homes and the care staff. And the reason, for the viewers, the reason it's such a big issue is we don't have state-run nursing homes, but the state is responsible for about 2/3 of the residents in the nursing homes because they're on medical assistance. They don't have any more assets to take care of themselves. So our reimbursement is what they really live on, and we also have what they call an equity rule that, or pay equity, and if the public's the private payee has to get the same rate as the public payee, which I actually support that provision. But incidentally, if we don't raise the rates, the private side doesn't go up either, and so the nursing homes have to live with those revenues, and 85% of a nursing home's expense is care staff. And so I'm still hopeful that we could come back with closer to 5% like the governor's proposed. It really isn't that much money in the big context, but of course everybody says that on every area. But 1% increase is about a $4 million cost to the state, and so to get that 5% really would only cost us about another $12 million in an HHS budget that's over $11 billion. Hopefully we could still find a way to do that. We all kind of cross our fingers and keep nudging the conference committee along, and we'll see how it goes.
And at the same time, we're thankful we're not serving on it.
Yeah,
And that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And there's sort of some real concern out there in rural areas about with the way some of the funding goes, that we might lose some nursing homes out there. I mean, in my area, and I would guess it's the same in Tory's area or Senator Westrom's area, that there's like 22% that are in danger of closing their doors. And so we really need to take a serious look at how that funding goes on.
And Barry, this I'll maybe segue or jump into another issue we just dealt with yesterday, was the minimum wage in the Senate floor and the House earlier in the week. But these are two issues that actually compete with each other, because not only is 2.5% or 2% very concerning to the nursing homes, if that's all they would get for an increase out of this final budget, but if we force the minimum wage up on them, that while their caregivers may be above the minimum wage, it's going to force their wages up either way. And so that's a tension we're dealing with right now. The Senate passed off a minimum wage bill largely on a party line vote yesterday, but the House did earlier in the week, and the Senate's is at $7.75, I think it is,
Right,
and
correct.
the House is at $9.50 by 2015. So those are some other concerns that are going on. So it's going to create additional tension if we're at 2% in the end.
We have several things we want to talk about the Mayo Clinic project. Some
Great,
for
it's
it,
not from Duluth.
some for it, some against it. We have a viewer from Detroit Lakes who's got a list of things that thinks should have higher. He or she thinks should have higher priority. Sartell Paper Mill, the closing of the Brainerd Paper Mill. Talks about International Falls, some layoffs in that area. Anyway. We do have the Mayo Clinic bill and some concern about it. Senator Westrom, let's start with you. What do you think that issue is going in the remaining 11 days of the session?
It is likely to happen to some degree. It's in the Senate tax bill, largely what the proponents from the southeast Minnesota are pushing for. I don't recall the exact number. I'm thinking it's about $40 million of credits and aids that would be extended. You're on the tax committee, right. Maybe you'd have a fresher number, but either way, I think to the viewer's question, I think something will come out for that. Those of us not from that area are concerned, and weren't quickly jumping on board because while it's a good thing, it does mean there's something else in the state that doesn't get it somewhere else, and so that's the tension we got to deal with. At some point, you have to act as state senators and state representatives and recognize the asset that the Mayo is to our state as well. And so I think that's where the tax committee has come down on bringing, it's like 25,000 new jobs over the next 10 years to our state to be with that much, with $3.5 billion of private investment. So it's commonly done elsewhere, and so I think something will be done for it, but it's something we're watching and not just giving in easy on, because we like to see equity across the state. And Senator Reinhardt might have a little more specific on the details of the cost.
Well, and I'm not going to talk to the cost at all. I think we all believe that or most of us believe that it's a valuable project. I guess I had the heartburn with things is we crafted legislation that was specific to Rochester. Mm-hmm. And I would have much preferred to craft legislation that similar projects in other parts of the state, right, if they met those guidelines, could be treated the same instead of carving that out specifically for the Rochester area. Right. So I believe there's value there for a project like that. I just wish we would have done it in a way that other projects in other parts of the state, that if they could meet those guidelines, could participate and take part of that same advantage and to some degree, and I'm not familiar with the House's language around this, and I don't know how much different it is. That's absolutely spot on. I represent Duluth. We have a major healthcare provider in Essentia. If they wanted to do the same thing, or Cirrus Aviation, whoever, right, major employer in St. Cloud, if they came along and said, we want to do this major project, add all these jobs, but we want to upgrade the community infrastructure in order to make it appealing, in order to make it a better seedbed to do business in, what tools are available. And to some extent, I feel, at least in the Senate version, that was done in terms of giving the local units permission to hang on to some of those local sales taxes, to add a few more things. But then also to be the first money in, Rochester, I think, has to have $200 million of their own dollars into the project before any state money comes in. And then this authority structure where you have folks that are appointed from the local and state to come together and make decisions on how that money is spent. So, sort of the outline of the structure is there, but I'm exactly with you. We ought to have a model that can be replicated. Maybe no other community comes along, but should one, we should be able to pick this up and go, this works for you too. We shouldn't have to put specifications in there to a certain geographical area. It should be, if you meet the guidelines and you meet those standards, you're in. Yep. And I think that would be, so we wouldn't have to do so much legislation. We could set those standards and have that done in the future, and we wouldn't have to revisit it every time somebody has the idea.
Definitely.
We have a viewer from Worthington who wants to talk about estate taxes. He's concerned that, particularly with farmland, concerned about heirs that have to sell the farm and pay
we're both looking at Tory.
State and federal taxes. Senator Westrom, let's start with you. Obviously, the 900-pound elephant here in the middle of the room is federal tax policy, about which you three can do nothing other than entreat your legislators, but there are state policy, state tax issues that have a bearing on estates in the state of
And
Minnesota.
I'm going to take a notion that specifically the question deals with our state exemption of estate taxes, which 2 years ago we conformed with federal estate tax law, raising it from $1 million to $5 million as an exemption for farmers and small businesses. The Department of Revenue has interpreted that, and the language, I guess, was ambiguous or unclear. So family farm revocable trusts are not counted in this category. That fix was actually in the tax bill in the Senate. So hopefully we can get that through in the final bill. But what it does is it would also qualify farms that are owned by a revocable trust where the land goes to family members. It can't go to somebody else, but if it goes to family members, then they would meet the intent of what our legislation changed last year. I think that's what the caller is calling about. It is actually in the Senate bill. I'm not sure if it's in the House bill or not, but it's a bill I've co-authored. Many of us in rural areas, Senator Coonan is carrying this in the Senate, and we're trying to make this fix for small businesses and farmers, because I think it really was the intention of the legislature 2 years ago. And so if that goes through and can stay in the bill, of course it potentially will cost a little bit of money in that the state says, well, now these estates we won't collect as much estate tax on. But it's a huge tax. I've got constituents in my districts, and one is actually pending on this outcome. If they don't, they're going to have to sell about half their farm that their grandmother left in a revocable trust, doing all the right things in estate planning that us attorneys tell them to do 10, 20 years ago. And now our estate law could force them to sell just about half their land in order to pay the tax, because things are working against them. One, they're excluded from the $5 million exemption, and two, with the price of ag land right now, it really is a double whammy.
Yeah. Representative Howe, we're all looking at you. Anything you have anything to say about the House? Or
and I wish I had those numbers. I don't serve on a tax committee, and I don't remember what's all in that tax bill. I couldn't tell you whether that piece is in there or not. I don't remember seeing it, but I hope that comes back from conference committee in there. It would make that more palatable for me, because I have a rural district also, and a lot
So
of
if that's in there,
farms.
you're both voting for the tax bill. Is that what we're getting from
I said it was more palatable. I didn't say I need it.
Not edible.
I was disappointed they mixed it with about a $1.8 billion
Right, yeah, there's some other stuff in there,
some
right?
other little things in the bill.
all right. Well, a viewer from Starbuck wants to talk about one of our favorite topics.
My district is calling in,
Yeah,
catching
well,
up with Duluth here.
Yeah, well, they want to know about the Viking Stadium, Senator Westrom. They want to know our sin tax is going to be used to fill a financial hole with the Viking Stadium. So since it's Starbuck, we'll ask you.
Well, I'm going to give the quick answer. I don't know the answer to this yet, but I know there are different things being talked about. One discussion that the governor's office has come out with is just literally use general fund dollars to backfill the cost. Last night, I was talking to Senator Miller, who was part of the Purple Caucus with you, and he's saying there is some discussion about gaming dollars. One might be a state-run casino. That would be a proposal that would work out some arrangement with maybe one of the tribes in the state that would operate the facility. The state would own it, and in lieu of that, the revenues would be much greater than necessary, but there would be an upfront payment that would just take care of the state's $400 million or $350 million that we're putting into it could be just taken care of right up front for such an arrangement. But that's another option that's on the table.
Senator Reinhardt, your thoughts?
Well, for the viewer, I think it really is unknown at this point. And Senator Westrom referenced Senator Miller. Both he and I serve on this legislative commission that oversees the sports authority that's in charge of building the new stadium. And we were actually supposed to have a meeting today, which got canceled because The House had some stuff going on, and there were a lot of people there, and there was no rooms available. So hopefully we'll have that meeting sometime soon next week, and that will certainly be a topic because, of course, the e-pull tabs are way behind what everyone had predicted they would be. So other revenues will be needed. I think it's probably safe to say the legislature will not approve general fund dollars to go to build a Viking Stadium, but I think other sources of charitable gambling, the Senate bill actually had a provision for a memorabilia tax. Other things are going to be on the table because the states made this obligation, and now we have to keep it.
And I think in the House tax bill, there's a memorabilia tax, but it goes to the general fund. It doesn't go to the Viking Stadium, and I think that, not only on memorabilia, all that sports, the preferred seating, all the rest of that should probably go there also and probably help us out on that Viking Stadium. But, right now they've got a memorabilia tax that just goes to the general fund, and that's going to be problematic, I think. And that's definitely a discussion that they're going to have to find the revenue to bring that up.
And just let me finish one. I mean, we also at least get reports from some that are in the area of the electronic pull tabs that they think maybe our expectations were too much too soon, but some of them may come back as it gets more developed, and there's more sources of electronic pull tab machines, because it's been pretty limited in the first year here. So that at least is a discussion that
the hole may not be as big as everyone thinks it is.
It may not be as big.
A viewer from Clitherbrook suggests we balance the state budget by imposing a 10-cent tax on every word said by the panel and the moderator tonight. So we'll see about maybe that is a revenue source. All right, let's talk about higher education.
Word tax.
Yeah, let's talk about higher education.
I want it to be imposed on words said on the floor.
Oh, there you go. There you go. This is more revenue. We can all go home. There's no budget to worry about. Let's talk about higher education. Viewers are concerned about where that might go in this session and what the status of this is. And some of this, of course, awaits targets and other things. Senator, that's your occupation, your field. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, the governor invests more both in MnSCU and the University of Minnesota. One of the challenges that we have had, especially over the past decade, is flat funding when inflation's factored in for both the MnSCU and the university system. And the universities, has not helped itself lately with some of the stories around high-paid administrators and things like that. What I would share from being in the classroom, at least in a MnSCU institution, is, my students are not getting done in 2 years. They're working multiple part-time jobs. And these are folks that are coming in already with a lot of times they're single parents. They've got other issues going on in their lives, and the community colleges are supposed to be their entree. The state universities are supposed to be their entree, and they're starting to become too expensive for even those folks. So, as someone who's in that environment every day, I definitely support more investment in MnSCU and the University of Minnesota. It is one of that and K-12 are probably the two areas that get significant funding increases in the current biennium.
And where are the various players on this right now? The House, Senate, and the governor. Right.
Actually, I think the House and the Senate are fairly close on higher education. There's some differences in K-12, but higher ed, I think, is pretty
close. The Senate's slightly higher than the House. I forget the numbers offhand, but it's in the tens of millions in both bills. Actually, I think the House might be around $200 million in new funding, and the House. Did I say House? The Senate would be around $200 million, and the Senate's about 150 or 160. Like so that's for both systems, all systems. But there again, that's the targets we're waiting for. We've got a question about HHS or Health and Human Services. More funding to higher ed in the end squeezes a little more on HHS or nursing home reimbursements or K-12 or transportation.
Everything's a trade-off.
Everything's always a little trade-off. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes.
Well, I would just add, and the viewers should know that in conjunction with that, there would be flat tuition rates for the next 2 years at the state institutions. So.
Representative Howe, higher education?
Well, and I was more looking at the veterans issues on higher ed, and I actually would, the funding piece, I guess I'm not that familiar with it. I still think there's more room to be made there, but and I think Pell Grants, all that stuff really plays a big role, and I think we need to do some shifting of who gets eligible for those things and who doesn't, and who has the eligibility, who has the ability to pay. But and you know, also when we start opening up, I don't think our tuition is high enough for out of state students, because they're so close to our in-state tuition students. I would love to see us, you know, get closer to what our bordering states charge for out-state students, and bring some of that revenue in before we ask our taxpayers to chip in more.
Well, here's a hot button issue that comes up every year. I'll pick on you, Senator Westrom, start with you. We only have about a minute and a half left. What about the mandatory school start after Labor Day? Where's that going? What's going to happen on that issue?
No.
I haven't heard the issue come up at all. I think the current law will stay as I think. I don't think it's in the Senate bill, and I think it's...
I do too. I think you have an interesting coalition of North Central resort folks and Duluth hospitality, our industry. It cares a lot about it. I don't see it changing.
Representative Howe?
Before I'd go there, I'd go to year-round school, so we're a long ways away.
There you go. Last question, just in the minute or so we have left. What's the wrap-up? I'll pick on you, Senator Westrom.
Yeah.
The end of the session, what does that look like? I mean, we got to finish midnight on the 20th, is that right?
We do, on the 20th, May 20th, Monday. You know, I would suspect a fairly smooth landing, given that this is the first time in my 16 years we haven't had a divided government, in the sense that the governor's office, the House and Senate are all controlled by the DFL. And so while we talked about the disagreements that are even among the leadership and the different Senate and House body and the governor's office, I think generally speaking it'll be a smooth landing, in that they all are in control, and it's not a political fight with another party. It's just difference of opinions, and so I think it should be a smoother landing than some years.
We hope that you'll come back to us next week to hear how the last several days are going to go, and then we'll be back with you for one more week following the end of the session. Thank you all for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week on the set of Your Legislators. Thank you and good night.
There's much more about Your Legislators online at pioneer.org. Find out more about the history of the program, who's been a guest, and watch all our past episodes. There's also a photo gallery, informative links, and much more. You can also get involved and stay in touch by following us on Twitter and join the discussion on our Facebook page. Thank you for watching Your Legislators. Your Legislators is made possible in part by the generous financial support of MAPE members, making Minnesota clean waters, safe communities, quality education, and veterans care happen. We work hard for Minnesotans. Minnesota Farmers Union, committed to helping develop and strengthen Minnesota rural communities since 1929. On the web at mfu.org.